Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series. My name, as always, is constant reader Scott Daly, and if I believed my co-host and Kingslinger in training, Matt Freeman, was in any danger, I'd pull this podcast around immediately.
Well, thanks, Scott. That means a lot to me.
No problem. Now fuck off, I got a tower to find. This week on the show, Matt, we are covering the end of Roland's story. Roland's story and Part 3, Come Reap, all conclude as we're covering Chapter 10, Beneath the Demon Moon 2. Roland looks into the wizard's glass and sees the tower and his quest to get there. He immediately abandons Susan, trusting a horny magic artifact not to steer him wrong, defeats Farson's men, trapping them into the Eyebolt Canyon and into the Thinny. Susan is unfortunately not so lucky. Charyou Tree, Come Reap. Matt, what'd you think about this week's reading?
Well, there's going to be a lot to talk about. I'll say that. I know the book isn't over, but something book length did just end, right? We ended this section, and I think it's more than just the ending of this story within a story. We also got to see the crucial moment when Roland first, he gets his first taste of the tower. So there's just so much in this section.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. The thing that blows my mind about this section, and we're going to talk about this a lot today, but every time I read this book, I am stunned and horrified at just how quickly Roland's like, I'm done with Susan. I'm done. Sorry, no more. Bye. It is always off-putting to me, and I know it's coming, and it's just like he gets out of the vision and it's just like, bam, he's done. He's like, they see, before he even opens his mouth, they see a different person.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful. It's so powerful.
Well, it's like he is a different person. It's like, it's like the young Roland character is gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, to spoil my intention of where I kind of want to take the discussion is I think that once again, as we have been treating this pink grapefruit as a metaphor for drugs, for addiction, I think that Roland got his first taste of an addictive drug with his first taste of the tower, and now he needs his fix, and that's it. I mean, I really do think that's if you see his changing behavior through that light, I think that's what makes the most sense, actually. But we'll have plenty of time to talk about that in detail.
Yes, we will. I like that. I like that direction. I think you're right. And there's going to be a lot to talk about there. It's just an incredibly powerful chapter. This is, when I thought about talking to you about this book, this is the chapter I was thinking about, because I think this is a chapter where King makes everything come together in a super satisfying way. This is where we really get to talk about what this book is talking about, why the story was important, what's going on here, and what's going to happen next. It's fantastic, and I enjoyed rereading it so much. And even that ending, it still gets me. I know it's coming. Everyone knew it was coming, whether you've read this book or not. And still, those final moments, Susan's final moments, still just rip your heart out. They really do.
Yeah, it's true. I think it's really amazing, actually, because I knew it was coming the whole time. I was like, I'd accepted it, and he still manages to make it extremely sad. So, good writing, Mr. King.
Yeah. Before we go into announcements, I just want to say, once again, we got a lot of emails this week, Matt. Most of them, however, were related to the fact that you don't know what Stand By Me is. So I think Matt and I have decided we have no schedule for when we want to do this, but I think we're going to do like a bonus episode where we watch Stand By Me and talk about it just a little bit, just to fix you, basically. This is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be fixing you, Matt.
That sounds good. Yeah. Could make it a Patreon goal.
Sure. Yeah. No idea when that's going to happen. We have a pretty tight schedule, but we're going to do it. We're going to do it. You got to watch Stand By Me. Yeah. People were horrified. I mean, I think people were generally okay with the fact that you hadn't seen it before, but I think the I don't even know what that is take is what people were like, what? Yeah, it was so fun to see. It's
funny. I can't really explain it because, normally I'm the one being like, oh my God, I can't believe you haven't seen blank. Mm-hmm. So when this happens to me, I'm confused by it. It's like, well, why? What happened?
Well, we'll fix it. I promise everyone, we will fix it.
Okay.
But let's get a little more serious because this is going to be a sad episode. And let's begin our discussion of the chapter. As we said before, there's only one chapter today, Chapter 10, Beneath the Demon Moon, Part 2. And we begin Susan's final chapter of life with her being beaten about and yanked along by none other than Coral Thorin. I really like this opening, Matt. It's a little bit of a mirrored relationship thing happening here, because this is occurring either during or immediately after the confrontation between Jonas and Roland. And I think King is very deliberately drawing a comparison here. Like, this little section ends with Susan basically proudly stating that Coral will never see Jonas again. It doesn't matter what you say, your bed will go to sleep. You will go to a cold bed tonight. And we see that of course she has no way of knowing this besides telekinesis, but she's right, of course. She's 100% right. And like Roland's words got into Jonas's head and just refused to get out of them, we see that Susan's words here get into Coral's, and the wording is very similar. Like, it says, the way-faced bitch sitting down there amongst the carrots and potatoes knew nothing, but her words, you'll never see Cy Jonas again, were in Coral's head now. They echoed and would not leave. So, like, Roland says something, gets in Jonas's head, and he can't get it out, and then Susan says something, gets in Coral's head, and she cannot get it out.
Yeah, I love that. I thought we were calling it ka-telepathy. Anyway, there's definitely a parallel, yeah, in that both Susan and Roland also they both appear to have lost, and yet their situation isn't as bad as it seems. And their bravado, Roland's bravado to Jonas and Susan's bravado here is actually justified, because they both do get out of this particular situation. Of course, in Susan's case, it's a short-lived victory. It's interesting. It's interesting, though, how overall this whole, backstory thing sort of has that feeling of the parable of the farmer and his horse, which I don't know if there's a better name for this parable. That was what it was called when I looked it up. But basically, the one where the farmer's horse escapes and the neighbor's like, oh, that's a shame. But then the horse comes back, and then the neighbor's like, oh, that's good. And the farmer goes, we'll see. And then the horse throws the son and breaks the son's leg, and the neighbor goes, that's a shame. And then the army comes through recruiting, and they pass over the son, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Good thing, bad thing, good thing, bad thing, unpredictable, like consequences of actions. The point being, there's this rapidly swinging back and forth of fortunes, almost scene to scene in this part of the book.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't think it's exaggerating to say everything ends up terrible for both quartets, actually.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's the funny thing is our like Roland wins, quote unquote. But I think it is so interesting, and we'll reiterate this when we get to it, that Roland wins the day, but it's after the moment that he's basically already said, none of this fucking matters.
Yeah.
Like, this is just unimportant. So King has literally taken that victory away from us, the reader, by removing the stakes of it. It's like, this doesn't actually matter.
Yeah.
Farson doesn't actually matter. None of this actually matters.
Right. I mean, they appear to just abandon Sheemie. Susan dies, and Roland is not Roland anymore, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
and then, man, I'm going to be embarrassed if I'm wrong about this, but Reynolds survives, right? So
yeah. I think so.
So each quartet has like one or two remaining members, and Rhea lives too. So yeah, it's just devastating for everyone. It's like I mean, I know we're getting ahead of ourselves, but like we get sort of this awesome like slam dunk of them wiping out all of these Farson's men, but it's all just so hollow.
Yeah, definitely. Like by design too. Like that's what King's going for. And we'll talk about more when we get to it. But I think you're right. And I think the way the chapter's structured, in which we jump over to Latigo one or two times, but for the most part we're just jumping back and forth between Roland's perspective and Susan's perspective in ways that it's really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But first, we got to get to the town proper. So we cut over there and we see a bunch of drunk townsfolk basically mourning the loss of their Reap Day fun. There's no games going to be had. And I love what King says here. These folk, sullen drunk as potentially dangerous as storm clouds filled with lightning, wanted someone to focus on, someone to tell them what to do, and of course, someone to toss on the fire, as in the days of Eld. And who should arrive to help give the people what they want but Rhea of the Coos. She's still looking pretty haggard, Matt, but the cord blood has revitalized her spirit, and her and Cordelia weave a tale for the townspeople. The in-worlders came to our town and did murder. They've escaped, but there's still one person here that we can punish for helping them. Ugh.
Yeah. I just went on a huge mental tangent with cord blood because it's like you got all those stem cells in the umbilical cord blood. Anyway,
oh my god,
it's if people save cord blood, it's quite striking how in her element Rhea seems here. Like she's been this like crazed, like marginal outcast person who nobody wants anything to do with. And then suddenly it's like, this is her moment. The whole town just accepts that, it makes sense. She should be the leader here. We're going to, they defer to her. They follow her orders without complaint. It's interesting what a dramatic shift this is for her character.
Yeah. And I think the reason why I picked the question I picked last week is because I think this says a lot about Stephen King and evil, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, just to pick up that one line that you just read from the book, like King really makes sure that we don't leave this part of the story without understanding that back in the days of Eld, these people just loved burning people alive. And I don't know, like, I don't want to go on a huge tangent necessarily, but like I was recently I read like half of Steven Pinker's The Better Angels of Our Nature, which is this book about how things have gradually gotten better for humanity. And the first half of it is like about like the past, obviously, or I think the whole thing is. But anyway, it's incredibly horrifying to learn how much murder and cruelty and genocide and just horrific death and suffering was just normal throughout the entirety of human history. Like your odds of dying by violence rather than any other cause were extremely high, like 10, 15, 20, 30, 40% in some eras of history, sometimes the leading cause of death. And, the book just makes you really happy to be alive right now rather than the past, for one thing. But,
Sure.
And also it kind of lowers your opinion of humanity. And I'm bringing this up because I think that this stuff that I'm talking about, like this like the darkness of human nature, the kind of horribleness we're capable of if we're allowed to, this stuff really does remind me, or King's books remind me of that in us, right? King reminding us that these people love their human sacrifice, I think really speaks to this idea of the dark nature of humanity and King's view of human nature and human evil.
Yeah, and what it takes to push these people. I mean, these are for all intents and purposes, normal everyday people, right? They're just people, like they're not the aristocracies of the world. They're the poor, the blue collar people of this world. Right. And how easily they are swept up into this extreme form of violence. Yeah. And I like what you said about the focus on the days of Eld, because, Arthur Eld goes back to our King Arthur mythos. And one of the things that I think happens a lot in the mythology of these ancient people that may or may not have actually been alive is we kind of paint this with this rosy picture. Like the world of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round were one of like utmost chivalry and honor and knightly duty. And of course that's not accurate. No. That was never accurate. And this is kind of like specifically poking holes in that. Like in the days of Arthur Eld, King Arthur, we just burned people. Yeah. This is like we've replaced the people with scarecrows now, but we're itching to jump right back to that.
Right. It's more like Game of Thrones, if
right.
anything.
Right. Yeah.
But of course, these people, like they are distinctly like, this is their cultural heritage, but this is not their culture, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like they've never burned anyone alive before. Right. But they know that this is sort of a ritual from the past. And so it makes you think like, well, we don't burn people alive anymore, but we're not that many generations away from doing that. So it does create that connection between us and them, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I can't, like, there are still states that do death penalty by electric chair. Did you know that?
I think I did, yeah.
I think there's like 2 states that still do it that way. Mm-hmm. And that's like horrifying. I mean, I'm anti-death penalty in general, but like that seems horrifying to me that we're just like still cool with that. So yeah, we are very not removed from the kind of violent ways of killing people. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
It's crazy.
Yep.
Yeah. So I love this line here where basically Rhea like sets them up and then Cordelia knocks them down. And Cordelia Delgado raised her head and looked around at the men. She took a breath, pulling the sour intermingled smells of gray and beer and smoke and whiskey deep into her spinster's lungs. Take her. Ye must take her. I say it in love and sorrow, so I do. Silent, their eyes. Paint her hands. The glass gaze of the thing in the wall looked its stuffed judgment over the waiting room. Charyou Tree, Cordelia whispered. I love this passage. I think the thing that jumped out at me the most is how King kind of breaks sentence construction here, right? Like Cordelia says, take her, ye must take her. I say it in love and sorrow, so I do, which is bullshit. And we, the reader, know that's bullshit. And then look at these two very short sentences, a one-word sentence and a two-word sentence. Silent. Their eyes. And that's it, right? Like, yeah. I think that is so powerful because it's so different from the way he normally constructs sentences. So both those really jump out at you.
Yeah. I think that's really quite amazing, actually, because you know exactly what he's doing there. He's just drawing your attention, the silence, and then you imagine these staring still eyes, right? He doesn't need to say the room was silent. Their staring still eyes gazed out upon, like, no, it's the intensity is amplified by the fact that he does this interesting construction. I really think that's cool. I agree. Mm-hmm. And I think, speaking more about the nature of evil, I mean, I think Cordelia's role in this scene in particular makes me think about, the nature of evil and the nature of how people are, because like Rhea is taking leadership and all, but it still seems like these people need the sanction of Cordelia. They need the sanction of this more central and accepted community member. Like I really do think that if Rhea had come in and said this without Cordelia, there would have been some holdouts. There wouldn't have been this just like immediate wordless agreement. But because Cordelia is here and she's one of them, she really is one of them, and she's saying this, they're like, all right, it's done,
Yeah, and I think you're right, because I think there is no doubt in my mind that if Rhea did not feel like she needed Cordelia for this, she just would not have used her. Like Rhea doesn't care for Cordelia. We know this. Like she's not in the habit of just chumming up to people for no reason. So I think she recognizes this fact too. And I think that I say it in love and sorrow, so I do is as necessary to anything in convincing these people to do this, right? Because this is coming from her family member, her aunt, her basically surrogate mother. It almost gives these people a pass, right? Like if this is Cordelia is the one giving you permission. Like she's saying it needs to be done. And then so the guilt at making this choice is kind of being removed from these people.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's exactly it.
So that we then cut over to our favorite boy, Sheemie, who is still following Susan in hopes of liberating her. He sneaks into Seafront, and we see Miguel once again. Miguel, who actually, the only other time we've seen Miguel around Sheemie, Miguel was pretty nasty to Sheemie. And I want to talk about this because King has chosen Miguel as this kind of character that he cuts back to every so often. He's one of the characters we cut back to most often that's like not a main player in the events in Hambry, but he's kind of like the get the pulse character. Like last week he was the one that was losing his mind, and this week when we see Miguel, we see he's festooned with reap charms and was very drunk. He approached the center of the courtyard and rolling side to side loops, the tug string of his sombrero twisted against his scrawny throat, his long white hair flying, and then he just cries out to the sky, "Who done this? Who done this thing? I ask you to tell me that, senor, por favor." And he's just like crying up at the moon, the demon moon, saying, why did this happen? Like it's just a perfect encapsulation of the way everyone feels right now, the way the town feels. Like we talked a couple weeks ago how everyone just had this feeling on their mind that this was going to be the last reaping, that the world was about to end, that there was something about to fall off a cliff here, and now this has happened, and we see through Miguel like this hopelessness.
I really like that. Did you just say taking the pulse character?
Yeah.
I like that idea quite a lot, because you can almost imagine like the first draft of this book didn't have a Miguel, and King thinking, okay, this sort of seems like it comes out of nowhere. There's no real sense that we know what these people are thinking or feeling. Like Cordelia has her own stuff going on. What does the average person feel about this? And by showing Miguel sort of gradually losing it, that really cues us in like, well, these people are all basically feeling somewhere on this spectrum of hopeless, angry, wanting some kind of structure and sense to be made of the world. And this ritual basically provides them that. It's like, oh, okay, well, she, as far as they believe, she helped kill the mayor and the chancellor, and she actually did kill 2 of their, lawmen. This sets things right. This is justice for them, and I think that does connect through Miguel. It's interesting. I hadn't really put that together. I like that a lot.
Yeah, Miguel is an interesting character, right? Because beyond that, like, Susan looks at Miguel with warmth and kindness, right? Where she's worried about him. Sheemie looks at Miguel with kind of anger. He doesn't like him because Miguel has been nasty to him. Yeah,
that is interesting, because my mental impression of Miguel was positive going into this scene, and then we see Sheemie's like afraid of him. I thought that was interesting. I didn't know what to make of it exactly, but my attention was caught by it because I was like, really? Sweet old Miguel?
Right. I mean, I think it's an interesting thing, like specific to the narrative of the story. I don't see a lot there, but I do, like, on a more subtextual level, see the ways in which, like, opinions of people are informed by your experiences with them. Like, to Susan, someone who obviously is not privileged in that she's a woman in this world, which is very unkind to women, but has positive experience with this man.
Yeah.
Whereas someone like Sheemie, who is a whole different set of issues and a whole different set of problems with this world and the way this world treats him, sees him from a completely different angle. And that's just the way in which perspective really, morphs how you view a character.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Susan's, beautiful young girl is the typical description of her across the entire story. So I'm sure the Miguels of the town usually just kind of like smile at her when they see her, and so she thinks, oh, they must be really nice, and they don't treat Sheemie the same way, obviously.
Yeah. So then Sheemie bumps into none other but the widow Olive Thorin, and for a second there, you're like, oh no, but then Olive is like, oh, I know that Susan and Roland weren't responsible for this. Obviously they weren't. That's very clear. And I'm going to help you. And it's mean. It's so mean.
It's very mean. Why does King have to kill everybody in Hambry who doesn't suck?
Because that's the world.
Yeah, I guess so. Good answer.
We then cut over to Roland and this is, we're going to have to spend a lot of time on this, Matt. We're getting shown what Roland is seeing in the glass. And this is it, right? This is the moment I think you've probably been waiting for, or even if you didn't realize you've been waiting for it, but this is the moment you've been waiting for since maybe the opening the first book. These are the answers. Why was Roland so obsessed with the tower? Why here? Like, why is he devoting everything to this? And the answers are here, right? This is where they come from right now. Mm-hmm. And it starts off with just Roland. And it says, he will hear this voice in uneasy dreams for the rest of his life, never quite remembering what he had dreamed, only knowing that the dreams leave him feeling ill somehow, walking restlessly, straightening pictures in loveless rooms, listening to the call of the muezzin, I don't even know how to pronounce that, in alien town squares. And this is it, Matt. This is King literally saying, this is the moment which defines who Roland is. And by Roland, I mean the Roland that we have known for the past 3 books, right? Like, by calling back to that original descriptor, straightening pictures in loveless hotel rooms, by calling back to that imagery, one of the first ways King used to describe this man, he's basically demonstrating this is the moment in which he transforms into that person. It's really powerful.
That's amazing. The callback to that description, because we called that out as just like a perfect piece of descriptive writing. Mm-hmm. And the callback here, I think you're right. It really seals this idea of like, this is the moment that propagates forward and defines who we know.
And King establishes that from the very front. We know that no matter what else we see for the rest of this vision, we now know that this is the thing that is responsible for turning him into the person we mm-hmm. saw in those first 3 books.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then we get this voice, which he almost recognizes, a voice so like his own that a psychiatrist from Eddie or Susanna's or Jake's Where and When would say it is his voice, the voice of his subconscious. But Roland knows better. Roland knows that often the voices that sound most like our own when they speak in our heads are those of the most terrible outsiders, the most dangerous intruders. So we have this really, really powerful, impactful setting here, right? Where King sets this up as he's hearing a voice is beckoning him, a voice is showing him something. And at the beginning, we admit that this voice might not have his best interests at heart. This voice might be trying to manipulate him or convince him of something, and it's doing it by tricking him.
Yeah, right. I mean, I just kind of assumed that it was throughout the rest of this interlude because of that. I was like, okay, well, King usually doesn't play like extremely elaborate trickery games with us. If he's hinting that this voice might be sinister, then I'm just going to distrust what it says, or at least question it.
Sure. Then he sees the entire journey he's taken in the book so far, at least. And we see it as well. First, we see Sheb plinking away at the piano keys. Then we see Brown, the long red-haired farmer Roland met after his wiping out of Tull. Then he sees Susanna's iron chair and thinks the Lady of Shadows, not knowing what it means. We kind of flash through a lot of the early parts of these books.
Yeah, he's shown his entire journey, but in a way that doesn't really stick with him, which is interesting. Like it's not, he's shown the future too, right? But it's just like teasing him with this idea that he could do things differently because we know he's going to forget it. Which, I mean, I think that's relevant because we already have this notion in the story that you can change the past. You can write a mistake. We know this. He saved Jake. I think it's rather fascinating to inject this idea of changing the past into your previous book. And then here you have this situation where, it would be super great to be able to save Susan. Right? Like how do you I think it's inevitable that you're going to make that connection at some point. Like, all right, we've introduced time travel and fixing mistakes, and here's the worst mistake he ever made. Maybe he could fix that, but it's interesting because like there's sort of a gesticulation at time travel here, but his memory is erased in a way where there's nothing he could have done. I don't know. I don't know if I'm articulating myself well, but I was thinking about time travel throughout this entire vision, actually.
Interesting. Yeah. I love that. I love that perspective. Yeah, because I think you're right that you can't help but whenever the book is kind of playing fast and loose with like it's showing you things you already know to be true. It kind of invites that kind of examination. But yeah, I mean, Roland has never shown any interest or desire or or possibility of righting that particular wrong.
Yeah. I mean, he genuinely has never really thought about time travel as a thing that he would go out of his way to do. It was just the whole schism in his mind. Anyway, that I don't know. I have no idea if there's going to be more time travel in this book or if that was just a one-off thing. I mean, sort of in a sense, anytime they go through a doorway to another world, it's time travel. So I guess that's
sure.
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, we will. Then he sees Sheemie's mule galloping towards Susan, but behind Sheemie is Rhea, channeling her inner witch of the West here, saying, "I'll get you, my pretty." She screams at the fleeing mule and then cackling. She is gone, zooming and brooming. So once again, we're kind of channeling our Wizard of Oz references here, which, I mean, I think we'll recall that our characters in the present are sitting outside a giant emerald city.
Right.
Tower, whatever.
On a yellow brick road, basically.
Yes. So it's just a little fun. This is presumably like the moment that Roland like concludes that Susan is safe, right? That's seeing Sheemie chase after her, because I think like we see a little bit later that this constant refrain is in his head that he's trying to like convince himself that he doesn't have to turn back because thank God for Sheemie. It's going to be fine because of Sheemie. But he doesn't seem to acknowledge that Rhea is right behind the two of them.
Exactly. Like it honestly seems as I was reading it, I was like, oh, like Susan has just dropped so far down his list of priorities that he's just not thinking about her. Like it's sort of a cursory, perfunctory, like excuse for not having to think about her. It's like, oh, okay, Sheemie. All right. Anyway, back to the tower thing. That's how it felt to me.
Yeah, I think there's something to that for sure. I mean, I think the book says that explicitly the second he gets out of the vision, but I think that's a great pull for how how mid-vision his priorities are realigning.
Yeah.
Then we get to the Thunderclap, which is what it's called, the area of Endworld in which the tower lies. And here, for a brief moment, Roland sees Oi, and we can assume that this is the future, I suppose. Ahead is a tree like a crooked, clutching hand. On its topmost branch, a billy bumbler has been impaled. It should be dead, but as the pink storm carries Roland past, it raises its head and looks at him with inexpressible pain and wariness. Oi, it cries, and then it too is gone, and not to be remembered for many years.
Ah, crap. So many death flags for Oi, Scott.
I know.
How many times has Oi died in this book in a dream or a vision or something?
47.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe, like, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole with this, but I mean, remember when, like, Roland is absolutely convinced in Lud that Oi's about to die, and he's like, well, this is the time. I mean, maybe subconsciously that's where this comes from, where, like, he has this memory in the back of his head, and so the assumption is, yeah, this thing's definitely going to die. So here it is. Here's the moment.
That's very interesting. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I didn't think of that. Cool.
Cool. Suddenly, Roland realizes that the voice he's been hearing is the turtle, one of the 12 guardians, and of course, as we know, one of the most important ones, the one that holds up the earth. But here's my question, Matt. Is it the turtle? So here, we one of the things the turtle says here is light. Let there be light, the voice of the turtle cries, which of course is a reference back to the creation myth in the Bible, right? But you remember which character in the Gunslinger made that cheeky quote back to the Bible? You remember which character that was?
It was the Man in Black, right?
Yes, yeah. It was. It was.
I'm just going to go ahead and doubt that this is the turtle. I mean, Roland already sort of told us, like, this is a dangerous and deceptive intruder. And so the turtle, his thoughts are slow and always kind. I don't think this is him.
Yeah. And I mean, without revealing anything, and do not draw too many conclusions, there's also a cheeky little pop culture Wizard of Oz reference in the middle of this vision that Roland is being shown. Who do we know that really likes to do, like, cheeky nonsense references that no one will get but the people reading the book?
Man in Black.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and also there's the whole wizard behind the curtain element. I mean,
sure.
Worth saying out loud. Maybe too obvious to belabor, but that whole story is about a wizard behind the curtain who's pulling the strings and I mean, yeah, there's a wicked witch and everything, but the wizard, it is called the Wizard of Oz. And I think the wizard, I mean, in the book is called Wizard in Glass, right? And I don't think the wizard is Merlin, you know. I think I think the wizard behind the curtain is either the Man in Black or the Crimson King. We don't really know. I mean, honestly, what's the point of just saying, like one's an agent of the other one way or another? So yeah. I think that is what is happening here on some level. I think this is from the bad guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this glass has throughout the entirety of this book so far represented nothing but badness, right?
Yeah.
Rhea used it to wreak nothing but badness. When Jonas got a hold of it, it provided him information that's nothing but badness. And now suddenly it gets in Roland's hand and it's going to show you your great holy quest.
Yeah.
You know, like it's hard to make that mental leap. Of course, Roland makes it, but I think King has given us, the reader, enough information where we immediately doubt all this.
Yeah, right. I'm wondering if, like, the black ball is like old 19. I'm wondering if that's like the One Ring, in the sense that it controls all the other balls, you know.
Interesting.
And that's what the Crimson King has.
For it is black 13, not 19.
13.
Yeah. There are 12 for the Guardians and 1 for the Tower.
I gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I always just remember 19 as being the bad luck number in the story.
Yes. Well, let's move on. Roland sees the field of roses, which to his young eye, I love the section when it's like, to the young eyes of a boy who just spent the day doing his first killings, he sees as just a field of blood, right? Not a field of
roses. Yeah.
Roses,
it doesn't even occur to him to think that it might be roses.
Yeah. And then I just, like, I don't have anything too much to say about this. I just love this description of the towers, because he sees the tower, and in its spiraling windows, he sees fitful electric blue fire and hears the cries of all those pent within. He senses both the strength of the place and the wrongness of it. He can feel how it is spooling error across everything, softening the divisions between the worlds, how its potential for mischief is growing stronger even as disease weakens its truth and coherence, like a body afflicted with cancer. This jutting arm of dark gray stone is the world's great mystery and last awful riddle. I just love that writing. It's beautiful. Like, the world's great mystery and last awful riddle. I love that.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Yeah, every time we rush against the tower narratively, it's so I don't know. You just love it. You want more of it, right? I think you're meant to. I think that's the point, actually.
Yeah. And Roland like immediately wants to get up in there.
Yeah.
like he sees it and is like, look at what he says here. I will enter you, me and my friends, if Ka wills it so. We will enter you and we will conquer the wrongness within you. It may be years yet, but I swear by bird and bear and hare and fish, by all I love. So
yeah.
This is where I think Stephen King's use of repetitive phrases makes his masterwork come clear, because bird and bear and hare and fish has been a constant refrain in this book as like a representative of the love between Roland and Susan, right? Like, this is the kind of the first phrase that they shared when they recognized their love for each other. Bird and bear and hare and fish give my love his greatest wish, right? And to Susan, that was always Roland. It was always, what I want more than anything is you. And in this moment, Roland basically says, mine isn't Susan, it's the tower. What I want more than anything is the tower. Instantly.
Yeah. Like we didn't even see the moment when it happened, right? Like this, I guess this was the moment. It's done. And then of course Susan, wishes him his fondest wish later. And his fondest wish is the tower, and that's just tragic. Yeah. It's so weird. It's so interesting because it really comes out of nowhere and like without real justification. And I really want to talk about like what an unexpected story choice this actually was for me, because in this moment, it's like the compulsion to reach the tower just strikes him as this fully formed desire and without any real rationale. It's like falling in love, or it's like getting the taste of a drug. Yeah. And later on he'll say to his friends, we need to do it because if we don't, the world's going to implode. And it's like, yeah, that's a rational justification. That's a good reason to go on this quest.
Sure.
But that's not what happens in this moment. Like, I feel like for Roland, it was the feelings first. It was this moment of the taste of it, and then the justification followed that. Just like with falling in love with Susan, just like with Eddie and his drugs, I think that he was struck by this thing that he is now addicted to. I think that's what this was.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. That's very good. I think you're spot on. Yeah,
and the thing is, like, I did struggle with it briefly because I was like, this doesn't like satisfyingly answer to me, like, well, why though? Like, why? I'm a rational person. I need to know why. Why does he change this way? And the answer is there's not a rational reason. The reason is an emotional reason that he rationalizes, and that actually makes me be like, okay, I get it. Like, I get what King is doing here.
Yeah. No, I think you're right there, because I don't think he does unsatisfying things intentionally or like accidentally, right? Yeah. Like, I think you're supposed to feel a little unsatisfied by this reasoning here, because it's not like a wise man came to him and gave like in a traditional like hero's journey type story, you are like it is very clear what your journey is, and here, like, no one's telling him this. He just feels it immediately. Like, I feel the strength of the place and the wrongness of it. I can feel how it's spooling error across everything. And it's not saying that he's not wrong, that there isn't a problem with the tower that needs to be fixed. That does seem like it is true. But I do agree that it's like, first, I need this. Second, I will find a justification for why I need this.
Yeah. That's what it feels like to me. I agree. Like, that's the thing. I don't want to downplay the fact that in the moment, he absolutely feels the wrongness. Mm-hmm. It's compelling to him, but I don't know. I just, on an emotional level, I'm reading it the way I'm reading it, and I'm trying to relay that. I might even be wrong. I mean, it'll be interesting to see, like, maybe after he finishes telling the story, Eddie's going to be like, Eddie is the standard audience surrogate, right? So maybe Eddie's going to be like, "That's it. That doesn't explain anything," and then Roland will explain it, differently. I don't know. We'll see, obviously, but yeah, I don't know. I wanted to definitely talk about this exact moment with you because it's not what I thought it would be. Frankly, I thought we would get like a satisfying explanation where somebody asks you, "Why did Roland get obsessed with the Dark Tower?" You could be like, "Oh, this was why," and we didn't quite get that. So,
sure. Yeah, I mean, I want to talk about what he says, what his final lines are, though, because so like basically the turtle tells him he's going to kill everyone he loves, right? Everyone you love is going to die, and still the tower will be shut to you. Right. Which is, I mean, again, this is supposed to be the turtle, one of our kind guardians, now being really vindictive and cruel. And I love what he says in response because the word choices is so interesting to me. So the turtle says that still you will kill everyone you love. And even if you get here, the tower will still be shut to you. And he responds with, "No, it will not stand. When I come here in my body, it will not stand. I swear on my father's name, it will not stand." The "it" here being the tower? I
guess it's interesting because it's like, I didn't think that Roland wanted to destroy the tower.
Right.
And so that you're right. It is. I honestly think I just kind of glossed over it as being like, okay, we're slipping into like the high speech.
Sure.
This is sort of like when Tolkien goes all elvish and high fantasy on us and uses English constructions that are very foreign to us because he's probably doing that thing where he's stripped out all of the non-native English words. Anyway, it's you're right. It is weird. It does stand out. It will not stand. Okay. You're going to knock it over. Also, just when I come here in my body is kind of a...
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the way to word this. Like, I guess like if what he's worried about is that the door to the tower will be shut to him, right? Like, I agree with you that this could just be flowery language, right? Like I won't stand for this. Like the door will not stand against me. Yeah. But it's just the word choices there was so charged.
Yeah, it would, like the obstacle will not stand before me, something like that. It could be that. Well, this is one of those things where when the story is over, it will be unambiguous. But I hope. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know right now. It does stand out though. Yeah.
Yeah. So back outside the ball, we cut to Cuthbert and Elaine, who are just like, what do we do? They're just freaking the fuck out. They're just watching Roland like totally succumb to this thing. His pupils are gone. It's just like this pink glow, and they're like, "Do we wake him up? I don't know."
Yeah. Like his eyes are gone. Yeah, it's so weird, right? I love it.
This time it's Elaine that beats the shit out of Roland, rescuing him from the trance, but just knocking him out. So this is it. This is the moment. This is why this book is so important. This is what I've been wanting to talk to you about for the last 10 episodes since we got on this book. This is why I think this is indeed the most important book in the series, not just because it's the story of when Roland's quest for the tower is first defined, but also because it is the first moment in which Roland chooses the tower above all else. Elaine wakes Roland up with the touch, and he's different. Not only does he suddenly have spots of silver in his hair, but his priorities have completely shifted.
Right. I mean, it feels like some like trauma has befallen him, right? Like something has touched him and magically, and now he's different. Of course, I think it's meant to remind us of he has his palaver with the man in black, and then he wakes up some amount of time later and he's like visibly older. We don't really know what that was all about exactly, just like we don't really know what this was all about, but it's like a magical inflection point in his story, basically.
And then he says, so matter-of-factly, "Susan's been taken prisoner," Roland told the others as they rode west toward Hanging Rock. "That's the first thing I saw in the glass." He spoke with such an air of absence that Cuthbert almost reined up. This wasn't the ardent lover of the last few months. It was as if Roland had found a dream to ride through the pink air within the ball, and part of him rode it still. Or is it riding him? Cuthbert wondered. And then, Susan, taken? How? By whom? Is she all right? Taken by Jonas. He hurt her some, but not too badly. She'll heal, and she'll live. I'd turn around in a second if I thought her life was in any real danger. And so once again, we see that disastrous certainty of youth that we saw last week as well. She's safe because he saw Sheemie helping her. And I think the great thing that King is doing is throughout the rest of the chapter and throughout even these conversations, King is intercutting this conversation with Susan's successful escape from the pantry, with Sheemie and Olive Thorin like actively helping her to get out and ride away to safety. And we're seeing her move from a position of extreme danger to a position of safety. And there's part of us, even knowing what we know about how this book ends, that is like, oh, maybe she is safe. Maybe she is safe.
Yeah, I got to admit that I've had this suspicion for some time that Susan's like obviously imminent death that's been known the entire story what was like a great fake out, the greatest fake out in literary history, and somehow she was going to escape. Maybe somebody else takes her place or something, and maybe Roland is just mistaken. And I don't know. I had this little thread of hope that like when you foreshadow something this strong, maybe it's all part of a head screw. But I didn't really believe that. And of course it was not correct. But this kind of thing makes you think, well, just maybe, you know, Olive's got her. It all seems like it's working out in their favor. And in a sense, they almost make it. It just happens that Reynolds is like in exactly the wrong place, you know?
Well, no, the ball told them to go there.
Correct. Yes. So yeah, not just happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was planned. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think part of this is we haven't quite seen the full scope of Roland's change yet. And so you kind of buy into Roland saying it, like, there is a part of you that says, well, if Roland thinks she's safe, I trust him because of course, if he didn't think she was safe, he'd leave immediately.
Yeah. I think that follows. Yeah.
But then we get this part here. Even if she is safe, will she meet them on the road after they escape? They ask to Roland. No. We are fools of Ka, the gunslinger said. Ka like a wind, Susan calls it. He looked first at Cuthbert on his left and then Elaine on his right. The tower is our Ka, mine especially. But it isn't hers, nor she mine. No more is John Farson our Ka. We're not going towards his men to defeat them, but only because they're in our way. He raised his hands, then dropped them again, as if to say, what more do you need me to tell you? And this is, Matt, last week I was kind of specifically targeting areas in which the book was showing up that Susan was making the choices she was making and gathering strength from the fact that she believed that through her and Roland's quartet, through the strength of both their quartet and the strength of their love, she would be safe. Things would work out. They would be strong together. And then abandoned. Quartet. Nope, it's over. She was never, she's like, her part on our quartet's over. Bye, later. It's shocking.
Yeah, absolutely. You feel betrayed. I mean, you feel betrayed, and Cuthbert and Elaine here in the scene are channeling that for you because Cuthbert is like, what the hell is he talking about? This is not Roland. They're creeped out. Like the whole rest of the story from this point, you see kind of Cuthbert and Elaine like sharing these glances of like, what the hell is going on with Roland, kind of, and you know, realizing that something terrible has happened to their friend and they don't really understand it. And King means it to be shocking for sure.
Yeah. And then possibly the most shocking passage of all, Roland says, inside the ball, I was given a choice. Susan, and my life as her husband and father of the child she now carries. Or the tower. Roland wiped his face with a shaking hand. I would choose Susan in an instant, if not for one thing. The tower is crumbling, and if it falls, everything we know will be swept away. There will be chaos beyond our imagining. We must go, and we will go. Above his young and unlined cheeks, below his young and unlined brow, were an ancient killer's eyes that Eddie Dean would first glimpse in the mirror of an airliner's bathroom, but now they swam with childish tears. There was nothing childish in his voice, however. I choose the tower. I must. Let her live a good life and long with someone else. She will, in time. As for me, I choose the tower.
Yep. I mean, I think it's so, I don't know, it's so powerful. And the fact that he says, you know, let her live a good life, she will, and I choose it. It's like, no, she won't. She dies within like a few hours of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that him being completely wrong about this, and focused on his own goal is just such a sort of a tone setter for his whole tower journey, I think. Just kind of, you know, not really thinking about the people that he's leaving in his wake. And that's who he is from this point until the present, I guess, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I think you asked, or not asked, but pondered when we read the first book was, how could a person do this? How could a person turn into the type of person who would willfully let a child die to continue on their quest, right? And I think this goes a little bit of way to explain it, right? Because Roland made a choice here, and I feel bad, like he's crying and he's upset, and I believe he believes this, right? I don't want to like say he's lying here, right? Like this, like I would choose Susan in an instant if not for one thing. I believe him in that. I believe, or at least I believe that he believes it, which is, I think, an important, different distinction. But he made this choice, and she died, and so now every choice that he makes from now on is predicated on that initial first choice that resulted in the death of his one true love. So if he gets to Jake and the tower says, you must sacrifice this boy or you won't get to the tower, then if he chooses to turn back, if he chooses to say no, if he chooses to say, no, I will not give up this boy, then Susan died for nothing, right? His choice that damned his one true love was pointless. And this is why Roland can't stop, will not stop. This is why I have trouble believing Roland when he says that he won't sacrifice another person for the tower if he feels it's necessary. I just don't believe that.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, yeah, once you sacrifice so much for something, it's like you have to sacrifice more to honor your prior sacrifice, or at least that's how it feels. So, and I think this is like a great way to turn a man into a monster. You know, you put him on this path, you set it up like dominoes, such that in order to get to the end, he's going to have to make an escalating series of humanity destroying sacrifices. And by the time he gets to the tower, he's the monster, right? I don't remember the exact wording that Roland used, but like this idea that like, if you reach the tower, but you're a monster or a beast, then it's worse than it's worse than the status quo, which is already bad, basically. So this is my sort of grand theory, I guess. I don't remember if I've articulated it in a while, but the idea that whatever force actually wants him to get to the tower, they just want to break him first. Sure.
Yeah, you've mentioned that a couple times before. Yeah. I think it's kind of shocking. Like, she's carrying his child, and you asked that question last week, right? Like, I wonder if he knows, and we see here the answer. Yes, he did know. He made the choice knowing that his kid, his son, is there.
Yeah.
And not like, even if he knows she's safe, right? Even if he fully believes that she's going to be safe and live a long life, he's abandoning his child too.
Yeah. It's hard to connect to, right? It's like it doesn't get any easier at any point for you to be like, yeah, you know, I really get Roland. Like you begin to understand him, but it's such an interesting way to do your protagonist, right?
Yeah.
A protagonist that it's just so hard to really empathize with, I think. Yeah. For me anyway.
I mean, there was part of me here as Roland's crying, right? As these above his young and unlined cheeks, below his young and unlined brow were an ancient killer's eyes, but they swam with childish tears. Like, there is some part of me that goes like, oh, I'm sorry, buddy. I feel real bad for you. You gotta let the woman who pledged her life to you die so you can chase after something that may or may not exist. Feel real bad for you, bud. Real bad. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think King is playing with this. Like, I love Roland, and I go back and forth on it a lot because I sometimes he frustrates the hell out of me.
Yeah, there's the kind of like plotting self-seriousness and lack of introspection, I think maybe is what's coming to the surface here.
Sure.
Because there's no it reminds me of Eddie's comment where Roland was like, God, I'm such a fool. I let, I tried to overrule you when you were really the one who had the right idea, and I'm so sorry. I beg your pardon, Gunslinger. And Eddie's like, don't apologize. You can't help your nature. This is one of those you can't help your nature moments. That was this book, right?
Yes.
I think
yes.
Yeah, because that was just after they destroyed Blaine, which was like 7,000 years ago.
Yes.
And so I feel like, I do feel like that was setting sort of a thematic tone for this book. That's your nature, Roland. And this book is sort of this story. Roland telling this story is sort of Roland coming to understand what that means.
Yeah.
What he's never really reflected on that before. What is his nature? Why is he like this? And he is reflecting on it and understanding it just as much as we are.
Yeah.
The text has basically said that because he was like, I need more time to think about this and process this before he tells it. So
I love that view. I don't think I've ever like framed it in that way that's what he's learning and processing. I really love that. I really love that a lot. Because this choice almost doesn't seem like a choice. Like he frames it as a choice, but there's no hesitation. We don't actually get to see the choice made. By the time he's talking about it, he's already made the choice.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he says in the ball, I was given this choice between this future and that future. We didn't see that happen.
No. Yeah. It just happened. Like we just saw him say out loud, like, yeah, we're in his head. And we're hearing his thoughts, but we just saw him say out loud, no, I will stand against the tower.
Yeah, right.
So, like we said earlier, as Roland states his full allegiance to his Grail quest, Susan is escaping from Seafront and on her way to go see him. I love that in these moments where immediately after Roland says he picks the tower over her, we get Susan mounting up and saying this, Roland, be thee well. Susan thought, I'll see thee soon, dear, as soon as I can. And it's so harsh because this comes right after that chapter where we're just like, Susan, he don't care anymore.
Ugh, God. Yeah, I know. Absolutely gutting. Yeah.
Susan continues on to the north, the way that no one would expect them to go, and here her and Sheemie say goodbye to each other. And I don't know, like, I just love Sheemie, and I love Sheemie's goodbye here. Thank you, Sai, Susan says, for everything. Sheemie nodded. When he spoke, he could manage nothing above a whisper. 'Twas only Ka, he said. I know that, but I love you, Susan Sai. Go well. I'll see you soon. I look forward to it. But there was no soon, and no later for them either. Sheemie took one look back as he rode his mule south and waved. Susan lifted her own hand in return. It was the last Sheemie ever saw of her, and in many ways, that was a blessing.
Yeah, I mean, am I wrong? This is the last we've seen of Sheemie in this book, or I mean, not in this whole book, obviously, but like that's it. No more Sheemie for now. Except I did want to pull out this quote from the Gunslinger, which I sort of remembered this was in there, but I wanted to pull it out for the sake of the detail.
Sure.
And he had been afoot for the last 12 days. The mule was at the end of its endurance, only living because it was a habit. Once he had known a boy named Sheemie who had a mule. Sheemie was gone now. They were all gone now, and there was only the two of them, him and the man in black. So yeah, I was like, I know that there was a Sheemie reference, and there's obviously a Sheb reference, and there's definitely a Susan reference. He's still processing, still traumatized by these events, still reflecting on Sheemie, even in the Gunslinger, which I don't know how much longer that is chronologically, but a lot longer in the future. I just thought that was worth pointing out at this point. Now that Sheemie is going off somewhere, presumably.
Yeah, we don't know where. Yeah, you're absolutely right that the Katet leaves him behind. But we've already established that he's kind of screwed himself over in this town, right? Like the choices he's made, the actions he's taken to help these people have basically eliminated his ability to live in this town anymore. And now he's off on his own somewhere. Right.
It's the only hope is I figure King's going to do something more with this character. We're going to find out something, like what was the consequence, because again, it's all sort of that, the parable of the farmer and his horse type thing, because like Sheemie's almost killed by is it the Pape?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then spared by Cuthbert, and then oh no, oh yes, oh no, and then finally abandoned. And it's like, okay, well, are they just gonna string him up too? I mean, it's really depressing actually. I think just like no, just literally forgetting about Sheemie is like the most depressing part of all of this.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, their friend is no, I don't even want to say that because that's dismissive of a human being. Sheemie is a human being that they pledged to help out, and then they're just like, bye.
Yeah. They called him part of their quartet, didn't
yeah,
they?
they did. Yeah.
They're just like they don't even think about him. It sucks. I'm so mad.
I'm sorry. So, of course, 20 minutes after parting ways, Susan just bumps into Reynolds. Yay. He's just waiting for her there. They try to talk their way out of it, but when that fails, Olive Thorin pulls out a blunderbuss, which misfires, and she's promptly blown away by Reynolds. So she's dead now.
So, I mean, if you look at Olive's story in these books, it just sucks.
Yeah, it does.
Her life just sucks.
Yeah. I mean, and like, you see this moment where she's going to like do something and help save the day. And no, she just gets punished for it immediately and killed. And,
yeah. Yep.
And Rhea is here, of course. And in her victory, she says hello to Susan. And I love this little callback to earlier in the book. Hello, my little sweetling, she said, calling her as she had called her all those months ago on the night Susan had come to her hut to be proved honest. On the night Susan had come running most of the way out of simple high spirits. Beneath the light of the kissing moon she had come, her blood high from the exercise, her skin flushed. She had been singing Careless Love. And it's just this like beautiful little like not long ago. Look at this moment of happiness, this moment where she's just running through the night and she just feels high from the love of life and her youth and the carelessness of her existence. And it's a few months later and it's all gone.
Yeah. As we're winding down the story, there's more of these moments that are sort of mirroring the beginning moments of the story. And I think that's a good storytelling trick.
So we cut back over to the gunslingers. They've snuck into Latigo's encampment and successfully set fire to the oil tankers, blowing them all up. The action here, Matt, is good and exciting, but I love how perfunctory it is. Like, they just wipe the floor with Farson's men. Like, it's less of a fight than even the Jonas fight was, which was already not much of a fight. But I think that's because, as we've said earlier, it just doesn't matter anymore. Roland doesn't care about Farson. Like, Roland is indifferent to the good man. He's indifferent to stopping him from getting the weapons that were his one true purpose. Susan's doomed. We know that. So that doesn't, like, there's just, like, the stakes of this actual fight here are just totally irrelevant.
Yeah, totally.
The only other thing I want to say is that Elaine almost is aware of that in the text. Like, Elaine had time for one clear thought. We could have gone around them. If what Roland says is true, then only the wizard's glass matters, and we have that. We could have gone around them. Except, of course, that was impossible. 100 generations of gunslinger blood argued against it. Tower or no tower, the thieves must not be allowed to have their prize, not if it could be stopped. Oh, so you'll make sure to right thievery wrongs on your way to the tower, but not saving the girl you love.
Yeah. It's the gunslinger blood, Scott. it's a remarkable little bit of self-justification, isn't it? Like they don't even bother to justify it. It's just like,
we have to. We don't have a choice. It's in our blood.
Yeah, I love the repeated moments of we don't have a choice. Of course you have a choice. It's so I do think he's doing this on purpose. This idea of like I must.
It's very easy. It's very easy to avoid making a choice if you frame it as if you don't have one.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you were saying, there's remarkably little tension here. It's just kind of this desultory victory lap where our heroes just blow away these poor idiots. And, then go on to lose the greater game because they didn't really understand what was happening.
Yeah.
It's funny because like this kind of thing just never happens in fiction where it's like the plan is we're going to use this, machine gun to lay down some fire, but then we're going to have to do this elaborate thing to get the tankers to explode. Mm-hmm. But then instead, the machine gun just blows the tankers up by itself.
Yeah.
And it's like, that just never happens in stories. It's like, actually, our plan worked way better than we intended.
Yeah, yeah. And again, because King's not trying to manage tension here anymore. He doesn't care about this. Like, this is a thing that has to be done to get our characters out of this present situation they're in. But it doesn't matter. It's not the focus of the story now.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we cut over briefly to Latigo as he's furious at what's happened. He's rounding up his troops and he greedily, and I think the text emphasizes greedily, chases the three gunslingers right into the thinny. Cuthbert and Elaine go ahead and Roland stays behind to light the fire around the brush to spring their trap. And when he returns to his friends, he sees this. And I this is a long passage, but I think it's really important and I want to talk about it.
Okay.
Mother and father was Roland's first shocked thought. Memory so deep and unexpected, it was like a slap. At Lake Saroni. When had they gone there to beautiful Lake Saroni in the northern part of Gilead Barony? That Roland couldn't remember. He knew only that he had been very small, and that there had been a beautiful stretch of sandy beach for him to play on, perfect for an aspiring young castle builder such as he. That was what he had been doing on one day of their vacation. Vacation? Was it a vacation? Did my parents once upon a time actually take a vacation? And he had looked up. Something, maybe only the cries of the birds circling over the lake, had made him look up. And there were his mother and father, Stephen and Gabrielle Deshane, at the water's edge, standing with their backs to him and their arms around each other's waists, looking at the blue water beneath a blue summer sky. How his heart had filled with love for them, how infinite was love, twinning in and out of hope and memory like a braid with three strong strands, so much the bright tower of every human's life and soul. So much the bright tower of every human's life and soul. So we have the dark tower, Matt. Uh-huh. And we have the bright tower. And what is the bright tower? Love.
Yeah.
Love.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I'm glad you did pull this out because I did not know that bright tower was capitalized due to the audiobook. Mm-hmm. So that clearly stands out as the antithesis of the dark tower. Mm-hmm. Makes you wonder what the dark tower symbolizes because, just sort of flippantly, hate is the opposite of love, but I don't think that's what the dark tower is. I think it's something else. I think it's more like this love versus other bad love, this love versus addiction love, Mm-hmm. If I had to pick a dichotomy to draw this line here.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, love is a big theme in these books, obviously. We've got Roland and Jake's particular kind of love. We've got Susanna and Eddie's romantic love, Roland and Susan's romantic love, Roland's love for all of his friends and various quartets, and just it's a huge thing throughout the story. So that makes a lot of sense, and I really love that. Roland's addiction that is destroying him, the Dark Tower, is being kind of offset against the Bright Tower, which is love, which is this even the damned love. He said at the end of the drawing of the three.
Yeah,
and I think that's really gonna be his arc in a sense. Is I don't know, being loving more and not giving into his addiction.
Yeah. I mean, like this, it's so fascinating because what he's actually seeing here, the thing that reminded him of this memory is Cuthbert and Elaine hand in hand walking into the thinny about to die, right? Like they've been kind of taken by the thinny and they're just freely walking into it hand in hand. And that image is what shocks him back to this image, this memory of his. And I mean, like we can get really complicated about this and say what is going on in Roland's head at this time. He has just made a decision to turn away from love, to turn towards the dark tower, away from what he has just described as the bright tower of love. And his guilt over this decision is playing in ways where it's triggering memories off of basic images. Like Cuthbert and Elaine are, like in this description, his mother and father are like arms around each other's waists, right? It's a much more intimate of a position. And so like I can see why your brain could draw those two dots between Cuthbert and Elaine hand in hand walking into the thinny, but I think it's part of his subconscious is drawing up these images like love. Here's the thing you just consciously turned away from forever. And or maybe forever. Obviously, we know that he loves Jake and he finds his quartet and he's being drawn back to it. But yeah, I think it's really, really powerful.
Yeah, it's like the romantic side of him kind of freaking out at having made this incredibly unromantic decision, because that's the key thing about him as a character. If you were going to write like the 3-line character sketch of Roland, it would be like a very not introspective and completely relentless murderer with a truly romantic heart at the core of him. And these two aspects of his personality are the driving inner conflict that describes his character. So this is that moment of the romantic streak shining through, I think.
Yeah. I think you're right. Awesome. So Roland manages to free his friends from the spell at the last minute, and the three of them climb up that little part of the Eyebolt Canyon that we talked about so many weeks ago.
That little jog.
Yep. And their trap is officially sprung, and they just watch as this happens. And gosh, it's pretty brutal, Matt. Like, dozens of men are sucked into the thinny. They're trampled. They're inhaling smoke. There's a wonderful part. Latigo pulled in breath so he could scream louder. They had to go back. Something was dreadfully wrong in Eyebolt Canyon, and hacked it out without saying anything. Screaming horses, reeking smoke, and everywhere, filling the world like lunacy, that whining, whinging, crying buzz. Ugh.
Yeah.
I think the most disturbing part at the end, though, is after all the trampling settles down, after all the crying and screaming settles down, the final moment, the final end to this is just all the remaining living people just casually and calmly, just like Cuthbert and Elaine would have, walking right into the thinny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great. I did keep thinking about how the thinny is just so much more of a evil demonic force than I kind of had assumed it would be. It's taken on such a different role than I thought it would.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, it's great. It's great horror. It's great Stephen King horror. I love this whole section.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have a question for you. We've seen a thinny in present day. Our characters are around one, and it does seem to be. We talked about this before, but it does still seem to be different. Like we got the idea. First of all, they went through a thinny to get to Topeka. And this thinny seems to dissolve people when it touches them.
Yeah.
So like the book is drawing pretty distinct differences between these things are. And I was wondering what your thoughts on that were.
I mean, it seems more like there's some evil presence inhabiting this thinny than like the thinny itself is this way. Like, because the thinny has been described to us as just like, oh yeah, it's like a portal. It's like a portal. And it's like, this is not a portal. I mean, it's possible that, we don't actually follow anyone through the thinny. So maybe they go through it and they turn out somewhere else,
Sure.
They're not dead. Maybe, I don't know. I think it's unlikely since we see people like missing their jaws and stuff. It's like, I don't think they're going to come out the other side whole. But, yeah, this seems more like a psychic presence that's inhabiting this thinny than just like it's a portal.
Sure.
Because clearly the other ones in the present day are more like portals.
Yeah. At least the one that they've experienced. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as they watch the horror unfold from the top of the canyon, Cuthbert then spies the demon moon, and so because it's changed color, it's gone from its orange pale to like this spooky silvery color, and in this moment, terror suddenly fills Roland, and he realizes he's been a fool. And he says, might it not have taken him away and shown him a dark land, a darker tower? And it had shown him something else, something that recurred to him only now, a scrawny man in farmer's overalls who had said, what? Not quite what he thought, not what he had been used to hearing his whole life, not life for you and your crop, but death, he whispered, and to the stones surrounding him. Death for you, life for my crop. Charyou Tree. That's what he said. Charyou Tree. Come, reap. Whew. So this is actually a part we kind of skipped over, but in the vision when he does see what clearly is supposed to be Brown, and Brown giving the life for you and life for your crop thing when he meets him outside of Tull, the text kind of just says, or at least that's what I thought he said. And we see here, no, that's not what he said. And then we cut right over to Susan after this moment, and we have Susan walking behind the man with the long red hair and a straw hat, which did not quite obscure his lamb slaugherer's eyes, the man with the corn shucks in his hands, that is saying Charyou Tree at her. And this is Brown, right?
I think it might be. It's really weird because it doesn't fit with my Tom Bombadil theory at all, where he's sort of this like Brown was this like anomalously good character who was so sort of like surprisingly, shockingly good that he gets Roland to open up a little bit and become a little bit more human. But I mean, this guy just seems like a symbol of the banality of evil. You know, he's just. So if this is Brown, I don't know what that does to my Tom Bombadil interpretation exactly. Like, it's possible that so one possibility is that King was messing with us, the reader, and making us think, oh, it's Brown. He's seeing Brown. When in actuality, he's just seeing another redheaded farmer who is about to, participate in killing Susan, and this isn't Brown at all.
That feels like an unfair trick from an author. I mean, when you take the time to point out the long red hair, which was a very distinct description of Brown, and have him with corn shucks in his hand, which again, Brown, like the one thing we saw when we saw Brown is that he was tending his corn crop. It just like it's Brown.
Yeah, but he didn't have that bird, Scott. So it's definitely not Brown.
Perhaps in the years between this moment and him getting to a shack on the edge of a desert, he picked up a bird.
Okay, but one more objection. Isn't Brown described as being young, like notably young? And so, but okay, whatever. I don't know. Could be Brown. I don't want it to be Brown though.
So Brown says, "Charyou Tree, come reap." And as Susan enters the town, more and more people keep saying it too. "Charyou Tree, come reap." And this is when Susan, I love this moment where Susan basically realizes she's fucked, right? She there's no doubt, there's no hope of rescue. There's no my Roland will come for me. She knows she's fucked. And she says here, with no gods to pray to, Susan prayed to her father. "Da, if these there help me be strong as lean be, and help me to hold to him, to the memory of him. Help me to hold to myself as well, not for rescue, not for salvation, but just so as not to give them the satisfaction of seeing my pain and my fear. And help him as well. Help keep him safe," she whispered. "Keep my love safe. Take my love safe to where he goes. Give him joy in who he sees, and make him a cause of joy in those who see him."
Yeah, the way she goes to her death is just so that's what kills me about it. Is it's like noble and at peace, but doesn't make it a shred less like tragic. And I think it makes it more tragic.
It makes it more tragic because even at the end, like, she's so fully committed to this man.
Yeah, and
he is done. He's done.
Yeah.
And he's sad about it. I don't want to take that away from him. He is, but he's made his choice already. Yeah. And if he had made a different choice, he would maybe be riding into town to rescue her. He's shot up an entire town full of people before. He could do it again. He could stop this from happening if he was there, but he chose not to be.
Yeah, there were other priorities, like killing a bunch of guys who didn't matter.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So Roland, meanwhile, has made his way out of the top of the Eyebolt Canyon, and like an addict needing his next fix, he grabs the wizard's glass out of its sack, and then the entire scene from here on out we see played out. We're like in Roland's perspective as he watches this happen. And here we go, Matt. Here we go. The crowd, still speaking those two words, chanting them now, it appeared, parted. Roland saw a heaped pyramid of wood that was the unlit bonfire. Sitting around it, their backs propped on the central column, their lumpy legs outstretched, was a ring of red-handed stuffy guys. There was a single hole in the ring, a single waiting vacancy. And now a woman emerged from the crowd. She wore a rusty black dress and held a pail in one hand. A smear of ash stood out on one of her cheeks like a brand. I love that she's left that ash smear on there in like insane defiance.
Yeah. She comes across as just such a in this moment. I hate Cordelia more than I hate Rhea, because in some sense Rhea is just this creature. This is just who she is. This is her nature. But for Cordelia, this is her niece. This is someone she was supposed to love and someone her brother trusted her to take care of. and it's just so horrible. Like, yeah.
I mean, we do know she's been hypnotized by Rhea, but we don't know how much of that.
I mean, she was already pretty far gone before that. I think.
I'm really not interested in defending Cordelia. Like she's, I agree with you. She takes pleasure in this happening. Like she is defiant and screaming at her and yelling at her and taking pleasure in it. Like, I was right. I told you. It's rough. It's rough. And so Cordelia is the first to scream at her and the first to light the fire. And even as she does so, Susan's thoughts are only with Roland. Bird and bear and hare and fish, she thought. Be safe, Roland. Go with my love. That's my fondest wish. Trying to remember how he danced with her that night, trying to remember how he had loved with her in the willow grove, trying to remember that first meeting on the dark road. Thank ye, Sai, we're well met, he had said. And yes, in spite of everything, in spite of this miserable ending with the folk who had been her neighbors turned into prancing goblins by moonlight, in spite of pain and betrayal at what was coming, he had spoken the truth. They had been well met. They had been very well met indeed. Fuck, man. Yeah. This is why it hurts. Because even at the end, she looks back on it and says, yeah, I'm glad that happened. Yeah. I'm glad I met him. I'm glad I loved him.
Yeah, I know. It's super, I don't know. It's got to be like a word for this idea of like, I'm glad to be, I'd rather be here dying at age 16 or whatever, having met him and loved him rather than having not met him at all. Mm. And that's just such a powerful sentiment to me.
Yeah, it really is. And then Susan dies. She screams one phrase twice as she goes. She screams, Roland, I love thee. And the first time she screams it, it takes the crowd back, right? As if they realize just for a moment what they've been convinced to do. And I love this moment of like, King even says, if they had stopped it, if they had all sprung into action right away and stopped it, perhaps things would have been okay. But even though they're taken back by her screams, by what she says here, not defiance, not pain, but just love, nobody does anything.
Yep. I mean, yet more of this idea of people and how they're crappy and banality of evil. It's very disappointing. It's very believable too.
Yeah, I think like, and this is like my Catholic upbringing showing, but I do see a lot of similarities between the crucifixion and this moment, right? A crowd of people who not long ago like honored these boys as they came into town, loved these people, just turned to want her death so vividly and terribly, right? Yeah. And then Susan crying out, this is Roland, I love thee, Jesus, it's Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. Like that kind of shocks them a bit, but it's too late at that point. And it's really powerful to me. I mean, I don't think it's directly making a Susan is Christ imagery here, but Susan is the sacrificial lamb for Roland's sins, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think any time that there's a extrajudicial, murder of this nature, the connection to Jesus is present to be made. And the idea that she reaches out for love, this big theme of the story instead of anything else, I think definitely is a great connection. I don't see a lot of other Christ connections in her story, but maybe I'm just not seeing them.
I don't either. I mean, outside of the disciples of Jesus connection we've already made earlier in the story, but that's not specific to her, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sense in which Roland sort of, said he would love her forever and then denied her in a sort of Judas fashion.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure you can find parallels if you think about it. I do think there might be something to that one. because he literally did deny her just before this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was Peter, by the way.
Shit. You're right.
He denied him 3 times.
The Judas would be Cordelia then.
Sure. Yeah.
So there are some parallels to be made.
And then, Matt, I don't want to read this. The final moments of her life here. It's just, King is so good at this and so mean, and I love it. At the end of her life, she was aware of heat, but not pain. She had time to consider his eyes of that blue which is the color of the sky at first light of morning. She had time to think of him on the drop, riding Rusher flat out with his back hair flying from his temples and his neckerchief rippling, to see him laugh with an ease and freedom he would never find again in the long life which stretched out for him beyond hers. And it was his laughter she took with her as she went out, fleeing the light and heat into the silky, consoling dark, calling to him over and over as she went, calling bird and bear and hare and fish. To care so greatly for a person that has stopped caring about her, who has chosen the tower over her and her child, like the decision was obvious and easy. Like, remember when he says to Cuthbert and Elaine, like, he holds up his hands like, there's nothing more to say about this. I don't know what you want me to say.
What do you want me to do about this?
For her to go out, bird and bear and hare and fish, give my love his fondest wish, knowing it's not her. His fondest wish is not her. That is torture.
Yeah.
It's torture.
I wonder if on some level she knows that it's not her, because it's like, if it was her, then he would be here. I guess the slight, I don't know, what's the word? Consolation prize? I don't know. Is that it seems like she's protected from suffering here, from physical suffering. The story does go out of its way to tell us there's no pain. There's heat, but no pain.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, all right, King, you could have made this slightly worse, and you chose not to. I'm wondering what to make of that exactly. Like her sort of selfless commitment to love maybe protected her in some way. It is not my understanding that being burned alive is anything other than horrible,
extremely painful.
So, I don't know exactly what to make of the fact that there appears to be no real suffering. It almost seems like a relatively smooth transition from life to silky, consoling dark.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to read too much into it. My read was always, hey, let's just cut her a little bit of slack.
Yeah.
And the book cuts her just a little bit of slack. That at least she doesn't go out riling in pain. She goes out peacefully, thinking of her love that chose not to love her.
Yep.
Oh, it's so rough. Poor Susan. Poor Susan.
Yep.
So back.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead. I want you to focus. I want you to live in this moment, because we're all sad right now. So let's just live here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I was just gonna say, I feel like whatever force has orchestrated this situation, to the degree that there are evil forces in the background, wanted to use her in this specific way. Basically, give Roland this person to love by connecting them, and then take her away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I don't know, that it really seems to me to be what the story is doing here. That's all I was going to say.
And take her away,
brutally
by his choice, or at least set it up to make it to where he seems like it's his choice.
That's true, because this is much less his choice than the Jake thing.
Sure,
that's much more. It's a boiling the frog situation where this is he probably convinced himself this is his choice, and that makes it a little bit easier for him to make the Jake sacrifice later, and that's going to make it in theory easier for him to make some other sacrifice that we haven't seen yet.
You're right, because the book does say when Roland very casually tells them, yeah, Susan's captured, I'm not going back because I'm not in danger. The book does say through Elaine that, hey, he's resisting every single urge. he like there is a part of him that really fucking wants to go back, and he's just actively resisting that urge. So I think it is absolutely true that unlike the Jake choice, he did not make that choice knowing that Susan was going to die. And that does make it different. Because I do think if he had absolutely known, he would have made a different choice. However, he did like jump to conclusions very, very quickly.
Well, unfortunately, this reminds me of the uncoupling, which we've talked about many times, where he realizes he's going to have to sacrifice Jake well in advance of the actual choice, and his reaction is to have this mental uncoupling where he basically decides, I guess I don't love you anymore. And by the time he gets to the choice, he's able to make the choice and just sort of go on from it without really feeling a lot of overt, visible angst about the choice.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the lesson that he learned here, horrifyingly, was, man, it sure would have been better if I had been able to just not love Susan, which is evil, right? It's terrible. But it's on some level, that's the lesson that his psyche learned that was traumatized into him from this experience.
Yeah. And it's like we've been kind of harsh on Roland today, but I do think it's important that like he is absolutely devastated, right? He watches this and it destroys him. I mean, he goes comatose basically. And part of that is the magic of the ball, but part of that is his inability to deal with what he has just been forced to watch. And of course the glass like gladly shows him this scene, right? Like it's probably like, yeah, sure, watch it all. Here, let me get you a better angle.
Yeah, and he's like, it describes him as like shrieking.
Yeah,
which is not a sound that you really imagine Roland making ever.
No.
So.
Roland shrieks, and they finally get the chance to rip the ball away from him, and they do so, and they're about to destroy it, but at the last minute they're like, no, we've worked so hard to get that thing, don't destroy it. And of course King does his patented, later he would bitterly regret doing so. Doing so meaning keeping the ball whole. And so it's like, oh good, we're still setting up for some future shit.
Yep.
And that's how the three gunslingers leave the town of Hamburg. We have this coda chapter at the end of this where this very unceremonious, like muted and then they left and they traveled for a little bit and we leave the story in this chapter with Roland. He's awake, he's eating, he's drinking, but he's not speaking, he's not talking. All he is like cuddling the glass. Roland was sitting up. He had taken the glass from the drawstring bag. He sat with it cradled in his arms, a darkened bit of magic as dead as the glass eyes of the romp. Roland's own eyes, also dead, looked indifferently off into the moonlit corridors of the forest. He would eat, but not sleep. He would drink from the streams they passed, but not speak. And he would not be parted from the piece of Merlin's rainbow, which they had brought out of Magus at such great price. It did not glow for him, however. Not, Cuthbert thought once, while Al and I are awake to see it anyway. Elaine couldn't get Roland's hands off the ball, and so he laid his own on Roland's cheeks, touching him that way. Except there was nothing to touch, nothing there. The thing which rode west with them towards Gilead was not Roland, or even a ghost of Roland. Like the moon at the close of its cycle, Roland had gone. Boom. Wow.
Yeah.
And that's the end. That's the end of the story. And we kind of don't get to see, well, how did he come back?
Yeah.
Obviously he did.
How did he come back? What happened to the grapefruit is one question I have. Mm-hmm. I'd be fascinated to learn whether that grapefruit is still with him. I suspect not, but it would be interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting how the story explains a lot, but also doesn't explain a lot. Mm-hmm. Like it's not how I was expecting Roland's obsession with the tower to arise, but I think that it does make sense. Like I said before, once you've had your first hit of a drug, you can justify your desire to get more of it, but those justifications sit on top of this deeper unspoken layer, the layer of feeling and of felt need, and that is still what's driving him through the story. And this trauma that he experienced here is still driving him through the story. So really in multiple different ways, this last, today's reading, this chapter shaped the character who we've been with for this story.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'll reiterate, this is why I feel like this is so important, and why this is the most. Scott Wampler, our guest, like months and months ago now, said this was the most important book in the series, and I agreed with him, and I still kind of agree with him. And maybe you and I will talk about whether you agree with him once we're all said and done with everything. But I just feel like you have to see Roland in this way. You have to understand Roland in this way. Just it's kind of a great kind of metatextual choice here, because King is almost saying both Roland needs to understand himself, and you, the reader, need to understand Roland before we move on with this quest. We've reached this liminal state, and we're going to cross over into something else. And before we do that, we really need to finally understand this guy on a level we haven't before, because a lot of that stuff is going to be, this is not spoilers to say, but a lot of that stuff is going to be challenged and inspected and looked at as we move forward in the final 3 books of the series. And King recognized he needed to do this, and Roland recognized he needed to do this as well. And it's so important. It's so powerful. It is everything. It is why Roland is the way he is.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me even more excited to move into the next part of the story, honestly, because
good.
I didn't quite put it together that way, but it's like, yeah, well, whatever direction the story is taking next, it required that Roland have grappled with this stuff. And I don't know if he's, resolved it. I don't know if he's at peace with it, but I think he's closer. It's out in the light. He is reflecting on it. This character who is famously unreflective, famously unintrospective, has just spent 70 hours telling a story about his past.
Yeah.
So, this is a big change for him.
Yeah. And that is the end of this week's reading. When we come back next week, we are going to finish the book. We are going into part 4, All Gods Chillun Got Shoes, which I think we can make the assumption is a Susanna line.
Yeah.
Because that's just kind of the way she talks.
Yes.
We're going to finish the book next week, Matt. Holy shit.
Awesome.
But before we do that, we've got to do some audience discussion questions. As a reminder for those of you, last week's discussion question was, what is the nature of evil in Stephen King's work? And man, Matt, you ask a broad question and you get 30 essays.
Yeah, I noticed the paragraphs and paragraphs of answers here.
Yeah.
So, we're going to have to trim those down, folks. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we're going to try our best to do that. We're going to move very quickly. I just want to say at the top, once again, I love y'all. It was a question that I was hoping we would get a lot of really interesting answers to, and I think we did. And what I love is I think everyone kind of has this very good understanding of what Stephen King's outlook on evil is, but I love the ways in which people described things and approached it from different angles. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of these answers are saying similar things, but they're saying them in different ways. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah. I can't wait to get into it.
All right. So first up, our first answer comes from AJXKZCOFLASDL. That's the name. So.
Ajax Kafis.
Exactly. Ajax Kafis just quoted Stephen King directly. Here's what Stephen King has to say. Monsters are real and ghosts are real too. They live inside of us and sometimes they win. Which I think a lot of people divide King's evil into 2 separate categories, and everyone has different names for these categories. But I think this is a reflection of those different categories, right? Stephen King's view is there are monsters in the world. There are evil things out there that are just purely evil. And if we let them take over, we will perform evil.
Yeah. Cool. I like that. Makes sense to me. Perry Jane says King's evil seems to come in 3 brands: inhuman evil, human evil, and mad evil. They say inhuman evil is the most obvious. It comes in the forms of the sort of creatures and monsters who are either literally not human or something sort of inhuman form, which just isn't human still. Then human evil is crappy people in crappy towns doing crappy things because it feeds their egos. And then finally we have mad evil, where there's something about a person that's fundamentally wrong between human and inhuman. And they say that this seems to be the one that he enjoys writing the most. That they list Annie Wilkes or Carrie's mom or Jack Mort as these examples. And they also talk about how sometimes he sort of melds or moves between different types of evil in a story. Again, I don't have a ton of experience with King, but I like this typology.
Yeah, definitely. Next up, we have Calinero 985, who kind of says a similar thing, but frames it a little bit differently. A lot of the evil in Kingsworth is surprisingly and distressingly mundane. The evil people in a King novel are often evil in ways that are very realistic. He doesn't shy away from the everyday evil of racism, of misogyny, of homophobia, and other bigotry. His worst villains, as Scott has pointed out, are often just bullies. Maybe bullies that are magnified a bit, but still bullies. His gift, which we've already discussed, for so perfectly capturing the thought process and mental states of even grotesque people, do an incredible job of showing exactly how real and human these people are, even as they do monstrous things. And Calinero goes on to point out that, of course, also in these worlds exists capital E evil. Evil with a capital E. Monsters, demons, evil things that exist out in the world, and how these things, the big E evil's corrupting influence is the most important part. How the big E evil almost always never operates on his own. In it, there is a big E evil, but the big E evil works through the people of Derry, works by corrupting or finding spaces where they can fill in that corruption and work through them to wreak horrible things on people. That is something that King does a lot. I mean, your Needful Things. I think Calinero says Matt's favorite book, Needful Things, for example, shows how just a evil can reach into and corrupt normal people.
Awesome. Yeah. I was thinking about Needful Things the whole time you were talking about that, because that is very much happening in that story. You've got a very evil sort of demonic presence coming in. In fact, Jared 369 in the next answer says there are two primary evils. There's external and internal evil, and that these often feed off of each other. And they say, such as in Needful Things, where the external evil draws out small internal evil from townspeople, and turn what would normally be a minor grudge into a conflict worth killing over. And that's exactly what I was thinking about. So that I really like that as an idea, because I really do think that is how this operates. Like actually, I think it's an important thing to make stories about, because it helps people understand and grapple with that in their own souls.
Yeah. And Eric T, our next answer, defines almost the same thing. He classifies them as human and supernatural, or internal, external. He also says internal, external, and talks about the ways in which those two evils play off each other. And he says here, the supernatural evils rarely make a lot of sense. We often don't understand why they do what they do any more than at a superficial level. We may be given their goals or needs, but these are rarely more than something like hunger. King seems to anthropomorphize his actual monsters a lot less than other storytellers seem to. What is really going on up at the Pet Cemetery, and how is it happening? What is the engine of evil at the Overlook? The Mist, the God and Children of the Corn, Pennywise, the Man in Black too. Even if we know what his goals are, we don't understand why, right? And I think this is very true to how he does this. He is less interested in the motivations of those evil, because he is much more interested in the motivation of the internal, of the human, and how those externals cause changes or allow these internal evils to act. And it's really fascinating. Like it's almost as if a supernatural evil can't exist without a corresponding human evil. I guess evil is the right word. A human choice, human action to do its bidding, right? They feed off each other. They require each other. One cannot exist without the other. And because both exist in these worlds, then we have to conclude that they're both necessary or just factual evils in this world.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like this is sort of core to his philosophy of how he thinks about these things, or maybe he just realizes that telling a story about a sort of supernatural evil with no grounding in human foibles is actually pretty inert. Either way, it does seem really important to the way he tells stories.
Yeah, I mean, it is very, like, King is not super religious, but he does have a religious background, and it does kind of reflect the Christianity view on evil, right? That, like, in the most literal interpretations, sin comes from the devil, and we are letting it in. We are choosing to let it in. There is this external force out there that just wants to be bad for the sake of badness. And when we sin, we have let that force into ourselves. And that is a very religious view of these things. And he mirrors that in interesting ways. And I think he does use it. Like, we talk about metaphor a lot on this show. And I think just and kind of an ill-defined big E evil is a great way to bring metaphor into it. So, like, you know, we can explore through Pennywise the ways in which a small town and the individual choices of small town people go to allow this rot to propagate through the city.
Yeah.
Personified in the scary clown.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I think it's truer to life. It's just a more interesting thing to write about. So yeah. Nick Gruey says, the nature of evil in King's universe at a high level is chaos. It is discord. It is a bad picture in a strange hotel room that needs to be straightened, but instead is setting you on edge. They say that one of the key things about King's literary evil is that it attacks the mind, body, and soul. It wants to attack your mind with madness, wants to attack your body with injury, it wants to attack your soul most of all, by basically turning your soul toward darkness before it finally kills you. They say the trifecta of evil motivation proceeds from some ethereal darkness that acts as a supreme evil. The supreme evil then bestows any combination of these evil motivations upon one or more characters or monsters who are willing to act on behalf of the supreme evil. Classic example would be Satan as the supreme evil, and the Antichrist as the willing actor. But the key to the evil being effective is not just to create discord and chaos at random, but to zero in on the target and attack them, attack their mind, their body, their soul, especially good people, they say. And with King, it's as if it wasn't enough for the characters to get attacked. Sometimes you, the reader, are the target.
Yeah, that's very true. Sometimes you read some of this stuff and you're just, oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah. You're literally destroying me. Some of the most disturbing, uncomfortable things I've ever read have been written by Stephen King, which actually kind of moves us great into Pet Monster 2004's answer, who says King seems to understand the worst of human nature. For example, Jesse's dad in Gerald's Game might have been the worst I've seen. I'm going to do everyone the kindness of not going into detail on what that man did. It is awful. It's some of the most uncomfortable things I've had to read. And Gerald's Game is a very good movie that excellent adaptation of this book that I thought was unadaptable. That's out on Netflix right now. It's very good, and the scene that Pet Monster is referencing here in the movie is very good too, and very disturbing. But there's something about reading it that makes it. I don't even want to think about it. It's awful. It's awful. It's literally awful. And King does channel these evils, like we've talked about before. We talked about this with Susan's sexual assault in this book, that he wants to shine a light on these things, and he wants to force us to experience them and live them and be disturbed by them and be made uncomfortable by them and be attacked by them, because that is kind of the way in which we fully understand what this thing must have been like, how awful it is, how truly evil acts like these are.
Yeah, I think that's very true. You know, we recently for book club covered a book where there was a sexual assault, and the book just sort of looks away from the act in such a way where you're almost left confused as to whether something happened or not. Yeah, which I never really liked that particular choice in that book. I just kind of chose to pass over it when we discussed it. But I mean, I'm not saying that means we should always depict graphically horrible things in in vivid detail necessarily, but I certainly get what King is doing and why he does it.
Yeah, and like I said when we talked about it last time, I fully understand people who take one look at that and say, no, I can't read this shit. I can't do that. It's too much for me. Totally get it. I would never tell someone they're wrong for that, but that is King has consciously decided to make a career out of just staring that stuff right down the barrel of the gun, right? Yeah. And refusing to blink. And that's just what he does. And I think he's very, very good at it.
Yeah. Yeah. SNAB J94 says that instead they want to talk about their favorite evil, which would be the past in 11/22/63, which I think is a movie where there's time travel or something. It's a book.
It's a book.
It's a book. That's what I meant. But they made a TV show, didn't they?
They did, okay. Starring James Franco.
That's what I was thinking about. They say they love that Stevenson can personify inanimate objects or an abstract thought. They love that the character constantly recognizes that the past is trying to slow him down and or stop him, which isn't inherently evil. Just from his perspective, it kind of is. That's really interesting. The idea that like time is the villain kind of vaguely reminds me of The Langoliers, which is a movie that I've seen.
Yeah. I really like that book. 11/22/63. It's a very good book, and maybe we'll talk about it one day.
Cool.
It's interesting because it's not my favorite King book, but I have this book that I bought, and you will not be surprised at all to hear this, Matt, but our listeners might. I bought a book at Barnes and Noble that is like the 1,000 best books of all time. I actually think I bought that when I was up visiting you.
Yeah, I think so.
It's like a list. It's like a list.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a list of the 1,000 essential books of fiction that everyone should read before they die.
Yeah.
It's just classic me because I'm like,
yes.
Oh, yes, I got to do this. Look, all these important books, I got to do this.
It's got like lists. This is the thing. Everyone just now you know.
I hate making lists and I hate ranking things. I will never, no time on the show will I ever rank Stephen King books. I'm not going to do it because I hate doing that. But I love consuming lists. I love consuming the 100 best movies of all time, the 100 best movies of the 21st century. I got this from my dad because my dad's midlife crisis was he bought a book called The 100 Best Books of All Time, and he read all of those, the ones he hadn't read at least. And of course, I got to one up my dad. I got to 10 times up my dad, so I did the 1,000. My point in telling the story is Stephen King is featured twice in this list. And one book is Carrie, his very first novel, and the second book is 11/22/63. And that kind of surprised me. That choice surprised me because, like The Stand, The Shining, like these are these are the books you kind of think of when you think of Stephen King. And 11/22/63 is a much more recent work of his that I don't think you think of as much. But, I think it's a little underrated, and I think that's why it appeared on that list.
Cool. Didn't realize it was that highly ranked. Awesome.
Yeah.
It's good to know.
All right. Next we have Drugs Possum, who says King has a few different characterizations of evil in his work, but I think one of the most common embodiments is chaos. So another person said discord. This person says chaos. The same forces that are called the white and the red in Midworld are even referred to as the purpose and the random in Insomnia, which ties very heavily into the Tower. The Man in Black in his many iterations is seen to be a proponent of chaos above all else. We've seen in recent chapters that he plays both sides of the ongoing war. His only true goal seems to be destruction.
Interesting. Cool. All right. Lynette B says there are two natures, the big E evil. Again, I think that's just a very natural phrase to use. The big E evil, the raw horror of chaos. And they list the tax, the its, the Randall flags, and the Crimson Kings that populate his world. Chaos in its pure form, Lovecraftian. This evil is primordial and independent of man. It feeds off man when available, but will remain without him even if weakened. Which brings us to the second nature, which is the nature of man, which is a curious animal, which is therefore open to seduction. And King's evil is one that seduces its victims, whether with power or pleasure, knowledge or wealth. The evil that transforms his human characters gains access to them by showing them something from which they cannot look away. That certainly fits with the Dark Tower.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I like this
almost perfectly.
Yeah, I like this quite a lot.
Yeah. Next, we have Zach K, who says, what makes King's work so great and iconic is that he's able to craft characters in such a fashion that almost anybody can relate to them. He goes on to say that the nature of evil in King's works function in the same way for me. Besides the monsters and ghouls, King makes evil feel extremely personal. He doesn't just place a character in and say, this one is bad. He tells us who and why they are what they are. He gives us reasons for us to consider them normal by making them relatable, as if this person could easily be your neighbor or friend. Yeah, that's a really great point. It's extremely personal. Like even with that all knowing, like extra sensory, like Lovecraftian evil, there is always the personal element. Always.
Yeah, I mean that's why I keep thinking about Needful Things all these years later. Is it's sort of the most simple form of this actually, where it's just a small town. The worst person in the town is really not that awful, if I recall correctly. I might not recall correctly, but
I mean, they're awful in just like the silly, mundane ways that people are awful in real life, right? Like it's just like there's a fight between the Baptists and the Catholics because the Catholics are having a gambling fundraiser event and the Baptists think that's despicable and they're just like being nasty and cruel to each other because of that, or like people are like passive aggressively barbing at each other because like one person is driving their car too fast or something. Like it's just the kind of everyday jerkiness, not anything beyond that.
Somebody's dog took a shit on somebody's lawn type thing. Yeah. Which, God, I have a personal story related to somebody's dog taking a shit on somebody's lawn and it escalating into like it's just a terrifying Stephen King-esque situation in real life.
So you murdered them.
This wasn't me. This was like two different neighbors, and I liked both of them, but they got to like homicidal levels of rage at each other because of a dog shitting on it wasn't even a dog shitting on, it was a dog like stepping briefly on the lawn, and it just escalated, and it was such in retrospect such a Stephen King moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that showed like just imagine if there's just an external force just giving a little push.
Yeah.
A little push. Or even, I mean, you could view that like that's like that human nature is that external force, just giving that little push that takes a intelligent, rational, thoughtful human being and turns them into a raving maniac.
Right. I mean, worth saying that there was no horrible outcome to this story. It was just really unpleasant and kind of scary for a period of time. And so ultimately, like the good nature won out over their inner, drive for whatever story their ego was telling them about what this meant in the great scheme of the universe, that they had been disrespected. They got over it. So, good triumphed. But
Yeah, good.
Coven Hunter says evil is power, not having power, but the use or abuse and quest for power. The human condition naturally wants to have some power and will usually take the path of least resistance to get it if unchecked. Those who do so are normally the bad guys and will do evil things. Humans who stand tall and resist the calling of the easy route are typically the heroes in King books. Interesting. Yeah, I like this answer just because it's distinct from a lot of the other answers we've seen, this connection to power. Yeah, that's cool.
All right. Next, we have Steve D, who says, in Stephen King's universe, evil often tends to be an individual or a group of people that take advantage of a situation to do something terrible. The Stand. Sure, a super virus wipes out a huge percentage of the population, but it soon turns into good guys versus bad guys stories. Under the Dome. Unexplicable dome covers the town, and Big Jim gathers a crew to do bad shit. Look at Hambry. Simple country folk get greedy, are swayed to cash in by aligning with the good man. They probably thought it would be the same as the affiliation. Leaders from far away with no real involvement in everyday life. Before they know it, the big coffin hunters come into town and are leading them into an ambush to their death. Yeah, I like that. Just everyday normal people that are presented with a choice to take advantage of people and choose to do so.
Yeah, and they haven't thought through the implications. And then when the implications come around, they're like, oh, well, it would be embarrassing not to go through with this.
Yeah.
Jake W. says they've only recently begun reading King. They already see that evil comes in many forms, from Deputy Dave and Magus not doing anything about the boys being put in jail, the indifference of good men, to the bullying Carrie endures when she gets her her first time of the month, to the outright evil of Flag wanting to blow up anyone who gets in his way in the stand, evil comes in many forms. To me, the most evil is when supposedly good people do nothing to stop evil from occurring. And they say that King stated that this is the evil that he fears the most, which makes a lot of sense to me.
It does, yeah.
I mean, it is the most likely that would actually happen to you. Like, you know, you hear about God. I mean, even in modern times, there have been genocides, and so many of these genocides, like the story you hear over and over is of the neighbors who just kind of shut their door when the mobs came around and grabbed their neighbors who were the wrong whatever, the wrong race, the wrong religion. And that's what turns my stomach more than, I mean, because really I've never had to deal with, you know, a demon, but I've lived in countries that had recent genocides. It's horrifying. It's a horrifying thing that we can do to each other.
Yeah. What scares me the most about it is you wonder what you would do in that situation, right?
Yeah.
Like I would love to believe I would stand up and speak out and do what I can to stop it from happening. But yeah, when you open your door and a mob is in the street, and you can stand out there and tell them to stop, or you can close your door and be safe. And certainly one is easier than the other, right?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, you're
scary.
I honestly think I'm full of shit if I say that I would face down a mob with like my kids in the house or something. Like no, I like to believe that I would, but I think the odds are actually pretty low, which makes me feel really shitty and cowardly. But
that's why it's, I think, the scariest of those evils, because it's so relatable. It's so easy to see that choice being made. Yeah. Stephen P says the nature of evil in Psy King's work is just that. Nature. Evil is a force of nature that's as sure and unending, unrelenting as fire. Since the Gunslinger, we have seen King shape, reshape, and explore what evil is and can be, from the first line in the first book to the massacre of the town of Tull and his following conversation with Brown. Furthermore, as we've seen many ways Ka works, evil is similar in that it isn't as simple as we think it is. King always finds new and interesting ways to explore this, and in doing so has redefined what it is and can be.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
I like that. Nature.
Yeah. That's very interesting. It's interesting. The answers that are unexpected, I'm like having to process and don't have any clever thoughts for immediately. So don't think I'm not appreciating your comments if I don't give a long response. It's usually because I'm like, I'm kind of turning it around in my head. Pete M says, fear is the nature of evil. It sounds so reductive, but it's also the heart of everything that happens. Fear guides many decisions. We were just talking about this. And when characters make decisions fearfully, we see them fail nearly every time. Roland fears losing the man in black and makes an evil decision. Susan fears losing Roland and makes an evil decision to kill at least one decent man. When characters make decisions based on love, compassion, confidence, and strength, they conquer nearly every time. The members of the Losers Club who are successful are so because they stand up to their fear. Oh, I like that. That works really well too. A lot of these answers work really well, and yet they contradict each other, which is really confusing.
Do they contradict each other? I don't know.
No.
I think like as I said at the beginning, I think it's just like different angles of approaching the same general thing.
Yeah, I think you're
right. Last but not least, we have Christina L, who says, I lost it. I think the main thing that King likes to point out, though, is that evil in this world is usually propagated by regular human beings, people who make the wrong decisions, people who act on instinct and hurt people as a consequence, and sometimes for no other reason than they just want to hurt people. Christina says that to me is even more scary than a clown in a sewer drain or a vampire next door, as evil could be lurking anywhere you go with anyone you encounter. Yeah. I've always found in my horror, that the supernatural stuff doesn't come close to scaring me as much as the mundane, this is just a human being making this choices stuff. Because I feel like I can rationalize away the supernatural stuff and just be like, oh, well, that's silly, right?
Yeah.
But people doing things is terrifying.
Yeah.
What people are capable of.
Right. On some level, supernatural stuff is fun, you know? Like it's kind of fun to be scared that there's a monster in your house in the dark or whatever, but there's not. But there could be a man in your house in the dark. Yeah,
there definitely could be. That fucking story. I forget what the term of those stories are. I don't know why, but where like the humans can lick to one. Have you ever heard that one? That fucking freaked me out for years.
The creepypasta type thing, or
it's urban legends.
Urban legends,
Phrase that I was thinking of. Yeah, the one where like the guy gets comfort from like putting his hand under the bed and having his dog comfortably lick it.
Right.
That fucked me up for years because I have a dog and I'll sometimes put my dog will be sitting next to the side of my bed and I'll sometimes put my hand down there and my dog will lick it. And every time I'm like, is that a dog tongue?
Let me see your tongue. Let me just check. Yeah, right.
I think that a dog tongue and a human tongue are distinct enough that I probably could tell the difference right away, but it doesn't make the story any less creepy.
Yep. I like to imagine, but you're still spinning that extra brain cycle processing whether you're 100% sure that was a dog tongue. So
right.
I hear you.
All right. Thank you so much to everyone who sent in the questions. That was exactly the kind of conversation I wanted to have. You're all awesome. I love you. If your question didn't get read, it's literally just because I pulled them before you sent it in, and I'm sorry about that. We try to read all of the ones we have, even though it takes, God, it's been 40 minutes now. I'll stop talking, and we'll move on to next week's discussion question, which is, what is your favorite sprung trap in storytelling? So in this week's reading, our gunslinger sprung his box canyon trap on Latigo and his men, and it worked beautifully and was so satisfying, even as terrible things were happening around them. So what's your example of a sprung trap being used in other kind of storytelling?
Yeah, we wanted to have a slightly lighter tone after the meditation on the nature of evil this week.
Yes. So have fun with it. Try to be as it's very difficult to talk about sprung traps without spoiling, so I guess we're just going to have to be like, you can go ahead and spoil it, and then Matt and I will make a call if we can reword that in a way that doesn't spoil it, but feel free. Again, no spoilers for Dark Tower after right now. Anything else, fair game, but no Dark Tower spoilers.
Cool.
And that is it for us this week. Next week, as I said before, we will be reading all of Part 4, all of Gods Chillun Got Shoes. And that'll put us at the end of the book. We'll be reading the last pages of this book next week. So get excited.
Awesome. Yeah. You remember, you can reach out to us at kingslingerspod@gmail.com or on Twitter at kingslingerspod. And of course, on the subreddit, reddit.com/r/doofmedia is where the discussion threads always are. So that's also a good place to give answers to the discussion question.
Yep. And if you are not already subscribed to Kingslingers, we do strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. We are on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can find podcasts.
Yeah, and if you like any of our shows and you want to support them, consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia. This week, special thanks to newly joined patrons, Bidoof's Pedro T, Bundle, Funky, Matt H, and Jaron J. And also new doof dancer, Indiana C. Welcome, and we really appreciate that. And we're just glad to have you in the community.
Yeah, we can't wait to talk about some more Stephen King with all of you. We are getting very, very close to our goal that we mentioned last week. So thank you to all of those who listened to that episode and listened to that call to action and acted. We really do appreciate that.
And remember, if 50 more people subscribe, then I will watch Stand By Me.
I don't know if we can quote that definitely.
Okay, fine.
But of course, if you cannot afford to donate right now, that is absolutely okay. It's a crazy time out there. We definitely understand. But you can still help us out by sharing this podcast with all your Stephen King loving fans, friends, and communities, or just randomly to whoever. Just keep up social distancing, but maybe say, hey, you, sir, put a mask on. And also listen to this podcast.
Just on your mask, just, write Kingslingers pod.
Yeah. Doofmedia.com.
Yeah, doofmedia.com.
We got to make some of those.
We could. We absolutely could.
Of course, you can always help us out by leaving us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. This week's Spotlight review comes from Chad Ace, who gives us 5 stars and says, I guess a third reread will be needed. Having read and reread, listening to a multi-time reader and a first-timer is rather enjoyable. Though Matt's hypothesis that the world has moved on due to an AI-related event is going to keep me up. Certainly worth your time. I think this might be an older review. I think you've kind of moved. Well, have you moved on beyond that hypothesis? I don't know.
I don't know. I haven't thought about that in a while.
It's crazy because we haven't thought about all of that in a while, right? We've been living in this story in the past in Hambry for the last 9 weeks.
Yeah. That's one thing I'm excited about is like how what is it going to feel like when we get back to our characters? I'm very excited.
Well, we will find out next week as we finish up Book 4, Wizard and Glass. Long days and pleasant nights.
May you have twice the number.